Hello to everyone. My name is Athanasios Fortounas, and we will be together for this session regarding political risk prevention and management. A little information about me. As I said, my name is Athanasios Fortounas. I'm an assistant professor in University of York, Europe Campus, City College in Greece, in Thessaloniki. You can see my contact details and also my LinkedIn profile and my blog. Please connect also with me so as to discuss issues about risk management. Also, I have an experience of 30 years in the Greek army and NATO in infantry and logistic issues. So here is our references, a couple of books that I've used for this presentation, but I want to discuss with you also during the live session the content of that books, especially the risk management part of project management methodology of European Commission. So the agenda for today, it is depicted on the slide. We will start with a small introduction of the risk responses. Then we will speak about how we can develop these risk responses and some best practices. Then which are the strategies of that risk responses, how to implement actually that risk responses in a best way, and then how to monitor risks and best practices about that. And we will finish with a small epilogue and then some key takeaways. So my focus today will be in operational and strategic political risks and less in financial ones. And the reason is that political risk has been a significant factor in international business since the end of World War II. So starting, I want to just transport you inside the risk war room, which is like the one you can see on these two pictures. The upper part of the slide has a picture of a war room before the start of the risk management process, while at the bottom part of the slide here, you can see the actual risk war room with all templates and how it is before actually starting the risk responses. So from the left to right, we can see that we have identified our stakeholders. Then we have identified our risks on the risk breakdown structure. Then we have analyzed all the risks and we have transferred them to the probability and impact matrix, which is an actual template for qualitative risk analysis. And maybe after that, if we have the software and the proper data, we can also conduct the quantitative risk analysis. But the next step now for these analyzed risks is to find the proper risk responses. But let's make one step back. Let's see what a stakeholder is. Actually, I think you have analyzed this in your previous sessions. Stakeholder is someone who is influenced by you or someone who can influence you on what we are doing. And when we say someone, we mean actually a person or an entity. And you can see on the pictures of the slide some examples of stakeholders for political risks. We have the government, the social media, or the media, the press. We have truck drivers that can influence a supply chain for a business or a state. We have the authorities of a state like the army or the police, the local community, the citizens. We have some agencies like the border control agencies or some international organizations here, Frontex, Olaf, or some non-governmental organizations, NGOs. The stakeholders can be the source of a political risk or sometimes also the solution to a threat or something that can enhance an opportunity. And, as I said, risk responses is the next step after the analysis of the risk. So the state that we are now is this one on a probability and impact matrix. We have all our risks inside there analyzed according to the probability and the impact they have. So our main focus in order to develop proper responses is actually, as we can see here at the upper left part, for opportunities to try to level up the opportunities and take them all inside the red area. And for the threats, which is, as you can see at the bottom left part, to find the proper response so as to lower them down, to take all the threats outside the red zone and put them in the yellow zone or even in the green zone. Also, during the risk responses development, we have to have in our minds, we have to monitor what it is called black swan risks. These risks are the risks that they are placed here in the low probability but high impact area for threats and opportunities. And we will discuss about that. We will discuss about these threats a lot, but also I want to discuss with you during the live session. So let's start with a couple of good best practices. Actually, the first one, and we can see that in this flowchart, is whenever you want to plan a response, think first your resources, is what I call resources for responses, R for R. You will not have the horn of Amalthea. There is no money trees in the world. You have to plan everything according to the resources you have available. Otherwise, you will face a lot of problems. And I'm not speaking about materials only. I'm speaking also about your actual human resources, okay? Because you might have money to buy materials, to buy capabilities, but if you don't have the proper human resources to actually execute the response, you will face problems. That's why one of the main steps is to plan and resource action. We can see here the example, a recent example from Italy, from Lombardia. I was living in Italy 3 years, from 2017 until 2020. And there was an incident last year in 2020 in the area of Milano. It was the coronavirus epidemic in that area. We had a lot of people dying every day because the hospitals was full. And then five millionaires in Milano, they have decided to take the situation in their own hands. So they have stated that in 20 days, they will build a proper hospital for COVID-19 patients in the area of Milano from zero. They have found an actual installation which is called Fiera Milano, and there are a lot of expositions in that area. You can see the pictures at the left part of the slide. So they stated that in 20 days, until April 10, they will build that COVID hospital with 160 beds for patients. Actually, they have managed to do that, and it was an actual success. And you can see here that it was inspected also by the church chief and other authorities. But actually, that hospital received the first patients not in April of 2020, but in October 2020, 6 months later. The reason was that they didn't have the proper human resources to actually implement that response. They didn't identify that the problem was that the area didn't have enough doctors and nurses to actually equip that hospital. So even if we have the horn of Amalthea and money tree, if we don't plan according also to the human resources, we might face problems. So you all know the incident of Titanic. You all know that a lot of people have drowned, but we ignore which was the main reason that so many passengers of that ship drowned that day. It was the fact that the people who have constructed the Titanic ship, they thought that in order to put the proper number of lifeboats on a ship like that, you have to follow the law. So they searched the law and they saw that the proper number of lifeboats for a big ship in that year was only 100 boats. But actually, 100 boats could save 40% only of the passengers of Titanic. But they said, as long as we are according to the law, we will not face any problem. So the actual night that Titanic hit an iceberg, only 35% of the passengers had the ability to get inside the lifeboat and be saved. So it is what another best practice is what Simon Sinek says in one of his books, that the low standards sometimes are very low standards. So be careful also whenever you are planning a response for a threat or an opportunity. Check the laws in order to see that you are okay, but also check if a law is obsolete or if it is not applicable in your case. So here are in this slide all the risk responses. On the left for threats, on the right for opportunities. But we have two common responses to risks. It is the escalate response that we will see in a little bit, and it is the accept. These two are the common response strategies for risks. So we will start with the escalate, and then we will move on to the strategies for threats with a couple of examples, and then to the opportunities. So we have the escalate strategy. In the escalate strategy is actually when a threat, a risk, a threat, is exceed your capabilities as a state or a business, or your authority and your resources. So you cannot do something on your own, and you actually level up the risk, give the management of the risk to a higher authority, like the government if you are a business. Or you can call an international organization that, like the OECD or the European Union. You can go to a government to ask for money during this COVID era because you don't have any revenues. Or, as we have seen, European Union had the lead in the negotiations with the vaccines companies in order to produce vaccines for European Union citizens. Also, during the pandemic crisis last year, a lot of international organizations helped in order medical supplies to move to countries that they have problems. Like we can see here, NATO, with the use of these huge airplanes they had, they were moving constantly medical supplies to countries that they were facing problems, like they are doing also today with India. Or here in Italy, Italian government had asked the help of the NATO supporting and procurement agency so as to give them 18 field military hospitals. And that military hospitals were deployed in 18 cities of Italy so as to help the health system to actually treat the patients from COVID. So escalate is when you ask the management and the help for a risk from a higher authority. So the other response, the first response we have for threats is actually avoid. Avoid is a strategy when you try actually to eradicate the cause of the risk. You try to do the probability of that risk to happen 0%. So we can see on the left part of the slide the yellow vest movement, which was initially motivated in France because of the raising of fuel prices and the high cost of living and a lot of taxes. So at the beginning it was a peaceful movement, but because it was affecting a lot the life in cities, with a lot of protests, a lot of riots, etc. Also, they were closing roads. The French government took the decision to actually put a lot of police forces in the cities and in the highways in order to prevent the blockage of these roads and the problems it was causing to the supply chain management of the companies of France and Italy. So they actually eradicate the cause. They stopped that movement by the use of police forces and a lot of arrests. Also, we can see on the right part that sometimes international businesses that are operating in developing regions, they are facing a lot of threats, and then they have to actually uh, apply avoid strategy. International businesses that operating in developing regions are always facing risks like civil unrest and domestic political violence, like we can see here in North Africa or even in the Middle East. And sometimes they are facing dramatic changes in foreign investment regulations because of a sudden regime change. Or sometimes they are being caught in locations where violence suddenly erupts. So they have also facing problems with terrorism, or sometimes their personnel is being kidnapped by local groups, etc. So the avoid strategy they have applied is France sent a lot of troops in North Africa, where there are French companies that they have investments there in order to protect the installations. The same with Italy. Italy has sent a lot of troops in northeast Iraq in order to protect the oil installations of Eni. The same happened also with the problem of piracy in the Horn of Africa. NATO and European Union is sending constantly the last 10 years warships in order to prevent piracy in that area, because it is a vital route for ships to move from Europe to Asia and backwards. So they are eradicating the cause. The next response about threats is mitigate. Mitigate, it is actually when you try to reduce the probability and or the impact of the threat. We have here the case of Estonia. Estonia in 2007, it has faced a cyber attack, probably from Russia. So for 22 days in April 2007, all the sites of Estonia's government, financial media, online services were knocked offline. They couldn't operate. So they have learned from that incident, and in 2017, they have signed an agreement with the government of Luxembourg so as to establish the first e-embassy in the ground of Luxembourg. Actually, they have transported servers, and they are keeping there in Luxembourg all the data that it is necessary for a state to continue working after a cyber attack on its soil. So they can do everything now from Luxembourg. They have lowered not only the probability of a threat, but also the impact of a threat of a cyber attack. The same is happening in the recent years with the foreign direct investments. Actually, European Union has a new screening regulation where actually they are trying to monitor all the foreign direct investments so as to have control on crucial sectors of economy, like the gas, like the ports, etc. The same is happening also in Saudi Arabia. If you want actually to start working on Saudi Arabia as a company to make business, you have to actually have 51% of your employees to be local. Also, the 50% of the board of the company that it is operating in Saudi Arabia has to be from local employees. Otherwise, you cannot start a company there. They want to monitor whatever you are doing, how you are using the installations, how the money flows inside their country. So they are trying actually to lower down the probability of all the money and the resources of the country to get out of the country. And then we have the third response of threats, which is transfer. Transfer is actually the response where you are shifting the ownership of a threat to a third party so as to manage it. So you have agreements, you have contracts, you have maybe a payment of a risk premium, but still be careful. Still, the reputation risk lies on you. The client knows you, or the voters knows you. It is a common strategy when you are trying to fight corruption. We can see here a couple of examples like the bridges that they are constantly collapsing in Italy the last 5 years, probably because they didn't build them according to the regulations, or what it is called white elephant projects, where you don't take into consideration the total cost of ownership. So in order to build integrity or to fight crime and corruption, you are bringing a third party with you in order to help you solve the problem, like the Transparency International or Olaf. This third party probably has the resources, the knowledge, in order to help you fight the threat, which in one case is corruption, in another case can be some sanctions that you are facing. For example, here we can see at the right part, Turkey. Turkey took the decision to buy actually S-400 anti-aircraft system from Russia, although it is a NATO member. So the response of USA was to put some sanctions against Turkey so as not to receive a lot of technology for the defense sector and the spare parts, etc. So what they have done, they have turned to other parties to actually deal with that threat, the threat of not being able to upgrade their systems. So they have turned to Russia, they have turned to Pakistan and Iran, and we can see here a symposium that they have made for the defense sector. So transfer is when you're bringing actually a third party to help you deal with that threat. But as I said, be careful, the reputation risk lies on you. And let's move to the responses for opportunities. The responses for opportunities are the exploit, the share, and the enhance. In the exploit response for opportunities, you are actually trying to make the probability of the opportunity 100%. So you are putting all your qualified resources there. You are doing everything you can in order to make that opportunity become true. You are using all your resources. We can see here on the left part of the slide the example of Switzerland. Switzerland is a country that has a lot of mountains, and inside that mountains there are a lot of bunkers, even from Second World War. So what they have done as a country is they have renovated that bunkers, and they are exploiting that opportunity to use that bunkers as secure data centers. So they are selling actually what their country, the ground of their country, is offering them. You can see here the project Mount 10, and if you search it on the internet, even on YouTube, you will see how they have transformed these mountains into data security centers, which are totally autonomous. They have all the supplies they want in order to survive. They have no risk of a flood, of an earthquake, etc. So no force majeure risk, and they have no connection with the outside world. You can see here that you can go to that site only with a helicopter and an airplane. So they have exploited the opportunity that the ground of their country has given to them. Also, there is another example of exploiting opportunity from a Greek company, the Coffee Island company. It is a company that actually has 500 stores all over the world and in 3 continents. So Coffee Island saw the opportunity 5 years back that they are a Greek company, so they are using euro, so they can buy a lot of raw material they need from countries that they are not inside Europe because of the strong currency they have. So, for example, they are buying their coffee from Africa or from Brazil. So, euro is a very strong currency, but also they are buying their paper caps from Turkey. Why? Because Turkey is near to Greece, so they don't have a lot of logistic costs. But actually, they are buying very cheap these paper caps because Turkish lira is now 10 Turkish lira are equal to 1 euro, while 3 years back it was 5 Turkish lira equals to 1 euro. So they are gaining a lot of money. They are exploiting the situation of the currency difference between these two monetary values. The second response for opportunities, it is actually enhance. Enhance is similar to mitigate, but now here you are trying actually to increase the probability of an opportunity and or the impact. An example can be actually the trade wars between two countries that can lead to an opportunity for a third country. We can see at the left part of the slide here the trade war between USA and China. But actually from that trade war, other countries are enhancing the opportunities of actually doing business with USA or with China more frequently. Or we can see here that Italy back in 80s and 90s, they have enhanced the opportunity in Libya to actually go there and construct installations for extracting oil, because USA didn't do that because they had a conflict with the leader of Libya back then, Gaddafi. Or we can see that on the right part that the Brexit had brought a couple of good opportunities, and they tried to enhance that opportunities according to exporting goods and materials to countries that they couldn't do while they were members of the European Union. I was in a conference back in 2019 of the British Embassy in Italy, and they were discussing that they will have a 50% increase of exports for defense equipment to countries that they cannot export now as a European Union members. So was an enhanced opportunity strategy to the Brexit. The third response for opportunities, it is the share. Share is common to transfer. You are bringing inside the game a third party so as to help you to, let's say, win the opportunity, to actually take an opportunity and enhance it or exploit it. Why? Because that third party has the knowledge, the equipment, the resources to help you do that. It can be also a major donor country or a transnational leading organization that can help you do that, like the World Bank, for example, and you are giving a stake in a project. So we can see here the example in Algeria, where the World Bank is actually financing a lot of construction of installations in the country, not only for petrol, but also roads, schools, hospitals, etc. There is also the case of Morocco. In Morocco, they are building the new phosphate port in the Atlantic, next to the Atlantic Ocean, with the help of an international construction company, which is called Archirodon. And you know, Morocco owns 80% of phosphate stock in the world. So we need that port there, because phosphate is the primary raw material for actually producing fertilizers. Or in Greece here, the Greek government 6 years back, they have called another international company, which is called Fraport, so as to renovate 20 airports around Greece. And they have made that very successfully, on time and on budget. Also, it was an opportunity. The COVID-19 for Fraport was an opportunity because airports didn't operate for 3 months. So they have speed up the process of renovation of these empty airports so as to actually finish them before the agreed end date and with a very low cost. So here we have, as I said, actually a third party coming to help you. You have special purpose companies, you have cooperation with international organizations or even NGOs in order to help you move on to one of your projects. But we don't have only responses. We have also to plan fallback plans or contingent strategies. Why? Because in some cases, the responses will not work, will not be effective. And in that case, you must have a plan B, which is called fallback plan. You all recognize this incident. It is the 9/11. Most of the companies that they were operating inside these buildings, the Twin Towers, didn't operate it after the incident, not only because they had a lot of their personnel killed, but also because they had the main server in the floor they were operating and their backup server in the basement of that buildings. So after the collapse of the two buildings, all the data they had was vanished. So their fallback plan was totally wrong. So you need a plan B to help you in situations that the first response to a risk is not working. We can discuss here the example of Victorinox. I think you all know Victorinox, a company from Switzerland, which is actually producing pocket knives. So before the incident of 9/11, 95% of the production of Victorinox was pocket knives that they had also a logo of a company, or you could actually order a pocket knife with a special logo so as to give it to a conference as a gift. So every businessman who was going to a conference, he was actually receiving as a present a pocket knife with a special logo on it. But after 9/11, that pocket knives was actually forbidden items for the passengers of the aircrafts. So it was a huge blow for that company because actually, as I said, 95% of their production was that pocket knives. And the money they were receiving to put also a specific logo on that pocket knives. So for 1 year, they were suffering a lot, but then they have enforced their backup plan, which was not to fire the personnel they had so as to lower the cost, but actually to send for 5 years their personnel to other companies around Switzerland that they were producing other items, other products, like you can see on the picture on the right part of the slide, watches, knives, secure locks, or even backpacks. So when the personnel came back to the company, they were able to produce that products because they have gained the knowledge to do that. So actually, for 5 years, they were paying their own employees while they were working in other companies so as to gain that experience. So whenever you want to plan a fallback plan, the need is to achieve agility. And agility equals to flexibility plus resilience. Flexibility is to be able to adjust to a new situation. And then resilience is the ability you have to bounce back to your initial state. So first you are adjusting yourself to see how you can, let's say, survive. And then with the resilience, you are bouncing back to your previous situation. The same goes with the contingent strategies. So in contingent strategies, which is not the same as fallback plan, you are actually trying with a strategy to to respond to a combination of risks. So when you want to actually plan a contingent strategy, you have to check the enterprise environmental factors. So where you are operating as a business, as a company. But we have seen a contingent strategy the last 2 years with COVID-19. A lot of companies, they have changed the production line so as to produce items and materials that they are useful for the population of a country to face the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, the Greek army, for example, they have changed the production line of producing army uniforms so as to produce masks. Or the French army, who changed the production line they had in their factories so as to produce special medical equipment for French hospitals. Also, I want to discuss with you in the live session how diplomacy of vaccines is affecting companies and countries, because it is a contingent strategy for some countries to actually sell or send vaccines to countries that are suffering a lot. But contingent strategy for risks is actually when you try to use a combination of resources in order to face a combination of threats. It can be opportunities, it can be threats, or a combination of these two. So, some best practices of how to actually implement that responses. The first one is the 5 Ws. If you will write a risk response in one sentence that can answer in these 5 Ys, the why, where, what, who, and when, then this response can be implemented very easily by those who are called, as we will see, risk owners or risk action owners. Also, examine all the options you have for the political risks and select those that are more effective, not just in terms of addressing a particular risk, but also in terms of potential applicability to other risks. Try to turn with your response threats into opportunities, but also try with only one response to actually confront a couple of threats. Also, for every response, actually assign a risk owner and a risk action owner. Risk owner is the person who has this possibility to actually ensure that this risk response is effective. He's accountable for the risk and the risk response, while the risk action owner or the risk action owners are the assistant or assistants of the risk owner. They're actually responsible for executing that response in a proper way and then report back to the risk owner about how effective was that response, and if they have any proposal, how they can implement it better in the future. Also, remember that wherever you are implementing a risk response, you have to identify if there are any secondary risks or residual risks. And I want to discuss also that with you during the live session. Secondary risks are the new risks that they are popping up because of the implementation of an initial risk response, while residual risks are leftover risks that they're expected to remain after the response is implemented. And here I want to add that, for example, as a risk response, NATO headquarters Usually, they have as risk owners permanent positions of political advisors and media advisors with the key responsibility to develop an appropriate political risk management policy whenever a NATO HQ is being deployed in another country or even for an exercise. So, we have planned our risk responses, but we need to implement them. And when we are implementing these risk responses, we have to monitor what is happening. And there are two uh, crucial techniques in order to do that, which is called risk reassessment and risk audits. So risk reassessment is actually when you are reassessing the risk, the two dimensions of a risk, probability and impact, after the implementation of a response and according to the current situation. On the left part of the slide, you can see the drones. When drones were invented, we thought it was a fancy thing, a thing that can, an object, a product that can entertain not only the young ones, but also the old ones. But actually, after 2019 incident in Aramco oil installations, where terrorists were attacked to the installation with a number of drones with explosives, and they have stopped the production of oil for months, or the two incidents in UK where drones were flying around the airfield for a couple of hours, and as a result, we had 1,000 flights to be cancelled. So 17 million were lost because of that. The reassessment of that situation brought to the surface the need for new equipment so as to be this equipment around installations, as you can see at the left bottom part of the slide. These equipments need to be deployed around critical installations so as to prevent a fly of a drone around that installations, or specific rules from the UK government and other governments in which how many far away you can fly a drone from an airfield. Or another way of risk reassessment is actually when countries are reassess the situation and they are not producing for their armies vehicles with trucks, but actually wheeled vehicles, like we can see that vehicle here, Uro Vamtak, which is a high mobility tactical vehicle. You can see that the frame of the car is the same, but with a high number of configurations and versions according to the client needs. So you have the same frame, but you can transform it to an ambulance, to a command and control vehicle, to a anti-riot vehicle, to an anti-tank vehicle, etc. So this gives you the opportunity to have one single line of spare parts, and also to train your personnel only once in order to maintain that car. A best practice on how to actually retrieve information and data for risk reassessment is, according to my opinion, to put one of your personnel to have as a duty to monitor constantly the situation around the world. So for a couple of days a week, he will be on the internet searching for any new risk reports, like the ones we have here from the World Economic Forum, the Global Risk Report of 2021, or like reports here from the European Union for disaster risk management and other international organizations or NGOs. Also, he can monitor the world news every day. Why? Because you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. You can gain knowledge for the best practices that other companies or other governments are implementing. Risk audits. Risk audits is the situation where actually, according to the current situation and what has happened at the past, we are examining our procedures and we try to make them better. So you need to use risk simulations, inspections, and exercises because they are learning tools and they can help you to identify the gaps in the procedures and actually be better. There was the incident in 2017 with a terrorist attack in Bataclan, and then ISIS stated that our fighters can go wherever they want around Europe, and they can hit you. So the French government was a little bit shocked how they have passed inside France these ISIS members, and they have done that. And then they have found out that they were actually French citizens. They had French passports. So the procedure they were using was only to check for passports that they are from Middle East or other parts of the world in order to prevent terrorists coming inside France. And after that incident, France also was checking the French citizens that they were returning to France from specific destinations so as to arrest any former ISIS members. Italy, for example, they are using GIS systems, geographic information systems, along with exercises so as to find the gaps in the procedures of the civil protection agency they have. Italy has faced a lot of problems with the procedures they have planned at the past for the protection of cities, not only from force majeure events, but also from specific accidents. They are calling them Seveco accidents. Also, here is the case of Germany. Germany has found that they have a lot of gaps in the procedures of actually identifying fake news that they can produce civil unrest. It was a case in 2016 of the Russian-German alleged girl named Lisa that it was raped by some Germans in a German city. And there were a lot of riots for 1 week from people that Russians that they were living in Germany, that there was a discrimination and there was a national sanction behind that, etc. Then, after research, they have found out that that incident never happened. It was a fake news, and probably whoever done that had the intention of actually producing tension, riots, and upheaval in Germany. So they found a way to actually be more quick in discovering these events. Risk audits, when you try to apply them, you have to have in your minds that the best practices or rule of thumb is not working always. Why? Because we have a global volatility and uncertainty. So we have seen, unfortunately, since in Bergamo, Italy in 2020, with military trucks actually uploading deaths from COVID-19. Why? Because they thought that the Italian health system can actually confront the whole situation, or what we are seeing now with COVID in India these days. So you have to have actually a plan for all this. You have to prepare your procedures. You have to test your procedures for, let's say, the worst scenario. For example, Greece was in an economical crisis situation from 2011 until 2016-17. And because of that, the Greek health system managed to actually adjust the whole procedures they had so as to operate with a low cost or even with a small number of personnel. So one of the procedures they have introduced inside the health system was every clinic or hospital has to have a risk management plan and a risk register updated. and that every hospital or private clinic, it is inspected by the Ministry of Health if that risk management plan and this risk register is updated every year. Otherwise, they cannot operate. You can see me here, for example, in a clinic, actually uh, executing a risk workshop so as to update the risk management plan and the risk register they have. You can see also the name of the clinic, and they have actually made an academy for that, so as the personnel to be trained, but also to change the culture of that company, the culture of the clinic, so as to have the risk management as a vital process, procedure inside the system. Also, a couple of other best practices. Be careful whenever you are executing risk management, or actually you are planning your responses, to try to avoid what I'm calling risk avalanche effect. So in that case, a lot of small risks, and when I'm saying small, I'm referring to the risk score of every risk. So a number of small risks to happen at the same time or to happen in a sequence and actually produce a big one. So small risks from green and yellow areas of a PI matrix actually to produce a big one, a very serious risk in the red area. It is what it is called also in the bibliography a white dwarf risk, a systematic risk, which is collapsing, and actually it absorbs everything, all your resources, and actually your company or the government is collapsing also. Also, another best practice for monitor risk is to monitor constantly your black swan risks. Put a risk owner on these risks so as to avoid these black swan risks here with low probability but high impact, to actually quickly raise up and go inside the red zone, because the probability will be now higher. Be careful on that risks, because these black swan risks, if they have transformed to emergent risk, you will face a big problem. Usually, what leads to that situation, what is the main cause of that situation of a black swan risk to be transformed to an emergent risk and go quickly in a very short period of time to the red zone? It is the biases we have. And there is a very good book which is called The Knowledge Illusion by Steven Sloman and Philip Frembach, which they are actually telling us how to avoid biases. Or you can see a video or read about what Plato has said in the story about Plato cave, how you must escape from the cave and actually see the world, analyze the world, how it is. So remember that risk management is a journey, is not a destination. It is an iterative process. It is a marathon. It is not a sprint of 100 meters. And one of my last points is that risk management, when you don't apply it, you are acting like the ostrich. If you hide your head inside the sand, that doesn't mean that the bad thing will not happen. Or if you don't apply risk management, you are like the gentleman here who is sewing the log he's sitting on. The result is obvious. Also, what I'm telling to my students in my classes in university, when you don't apply risk management, not only in your company, but also in your everyday life, it is like playing Russian roulette. But in that case, every day that is passing by, you are adding one more bullet inside the chamber. So be careful, apply risk management. I'm proposing you, if you want to search in-depth risk management, to read some of these books. The upper part here of the slide is books from Nassim Taleb, which is the author of the Black Swan book in 2007. I'm reminding you that Black Swan risks are the risks with low probability but high impact. They can be threats and opportunities. And inside that book, you can find a lot of examples. Then he moved on in 2010 to the Bed of Procrustes book with a lot of aphorisms, as he's saying. That book speaks a lot about biases and how we can avoid these biases in small essays. Then in 2012, he wrote another book which is called Antifragile. Actually, he's telling us and he's guiding us very smartly how you can gain agility by what I said before in a previous slide with flexibility and resilience. And one of his last books was in 2018, Skin in the Game, where he actually is telling us how we can confront hidden asymmetries in daily life and how we can actually implement responses in a most effective way. But also, there are other great books that you can read about risk management or even how stakeholders can be a source of a risk or the solution in a risk, like this book here from Lida Byrne, Making Project Works, or The Risk Management Concept and Guidance by Carl Pritchard. And a very good book is that book, Against the Gods, from Peter Bernstein. So, finishing up my presentation, I want to make some proposals what to discuss during our live session. Firstly, I want to discuss with you if you know what gray rhinos risks are and which are the similarities or the differences between black swans. You know, it is very funny to use names of animals for categories of risks. Also, I want to discuss with you what is a white dwarf risk, which is a systemic risk, and some examples if you know about systemic risks. Also, if you know or if you want to propose any other best practices for risk responses or how to monitor risks. And of course, I want to discuss with you which are the political risks that we are facing now due to COVID-19. So this concludes my presentation. I'm leaving you with that phrase that the only alternative to risk management is crisis management. But crisis management is more expensive, time-consuming, embarrassing, and usually leads to management of losses. The last one is ringing a bell to you for some countries. So my contact details are also here on that slide. I hope you have enjoyed this record session, and I'm waiting to see you all in the live session with Dr. Elias Katsouros. Stay safe, stay healthy.